just a little bit on the book of Romans before we go into the gospel. One of the things about the book of Romans is that it's kind of, for me, divided up into three parts. It's Paul's very famous treatise on the idea that we are justified by faith and not by works of the law. So that's the first 8 chapters. Then 9 through 11 is the story of, well, did God somehow abandon his chosen people of Israel? And if God somehow abandoned them, why won't he abandon us? So Paul has to take on that in chapters 9 through 11. And then 12 through following is the idea of what is the Christian life, giving instructions on the Christian life. In the gospel, what we have Mary, who's going to be giving birth. Joseph has the opportunity to think about that, because it's not within that particular society that a person who is betrothed is pregnant. And so he has to think about it, and has been told in a dream to take Mary as his wife. There are a couple of things that go on. One is that some people would say, well, Joseph is trying to determine whether or not Mary was faithful, because at one time back when Israel was ruled by the kings and by the judges, that at one time they could have a person stoned if they indeed were pregnant outside of wedlock. That really was not the case at the time of Joseph. So that's, people will mention that, but it's kind of off the table. The other thing is, so he has to think about that. The other one is that he thinks about, that some people say is, no, he knows that Mary is telling the truth, but he's concerned because, just like St. Peter, when Jesus caused the miraculous catch of fish, St. Peter says, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man." So Joseph says, I'm not worthy to be the foster father of Jesus. So that's the other take on the story with Joseph. But really, when we think about it, their lives, both Mary and Joseph, are going to change. You cannot give birth to the Messiah and have a life that's, sedentary, kind of, time of Jesus, at the time, if somebody who was a carpenter, pretty steady lifestyle, nothing major, nothing, important. Persons didn't live that long. Persons got married for a girl in their early teens, for a man in mid to late teens. Life was not that long. Certainly there were some who could live to be 70, 80 years old, but many, because of medicines that we have today that they didn't have back then, lived into their 30s or early 40s. So it really wasn't that that major of things going on, but certainly to be the foster father of Jesus, certainly to be the mother of Jesus, would certainly be a difference. Their lives would be totally different. How would it occur? They would not know. But they have to trust in the Lord that even though they don't know how the situation is going to be, even though it's going to be very different than if their birth of their child had been natural, within the natural realm, then, it certainly would have been very different. But they don't know. And so what it does is that it calls them to have that faith in God. And both of them certainly do have that faith in God. So really, when we think about Mary and Joseph, we really think about those models of faith, that even though they were not given the instruction, they were not given the playbook, of what's going to occur, that they certainly were willing to have that desire to give birth to the Messiah. Thanks, and God bless.